everyone, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to Relevant Jukebox. So here we are, we made it. This is going to be a video of my top 25 records of the decade, rounding out my top 100 list. If you have not seen those other videos, I'm going to leave links down below to them so you guys can check those out. But before I get into the last part of this list, if you are new to my channel and you have not yet subscribed, if you like music discussions, music content, I'd really appreciate it if you considered subscribing, because I'm going to be pretty active on here this upcoming year, and I'll be reviewing new records that come out. And if you do like this video, I'd really appreciate if you drop a like down below so more people can see it and share it. So let's do this top 25 time. At number 25, I have FKA Twigs, LP1. Now this record is extremely ahead of the curve, especially when it came out, and was my introduction to FKA Twigs. Arca's production on here is just unrivaled, and Twigs gives some emotionally potent performances. At number 24, I have Sleigh Bells, Treats. Now this is a record here that I feel like his influence is just starting to catch on in like the past couple years. And you know, there's something about this release, it kind of reminds me of Weezer's Pinkerton, how it is so loud and uncompromisingly rock. It's like it rocks right through any stereo system or headphones that you're listening to. At number 23, I have JPEGMAFIA's Veteran. Now JPEGMAFIA burst onto the scene in 2018 with this breakout album here, and he offered like a really uncompromising and fresh, almost punky sound for hip-hop. And since then, to me, has proven himself to be one of the better producers out there, and colorful personalities as well. At number 22, I have the Drive soundtrack. This is the only soundtrack I have on this list here. It has been one that has stuck with me. Absolutely timeless singles on here, like A Real Hero. Kavinsky has some really great production on here, and also Johnny Jewel. But not only was this movie really intriguing, but I thought the soundtrack actually was better than the film. At number 21, I have Flying Lotus, Cosmagramma. This is still my favorite Flying Lotus record, and one that I think offers an extremely mind-melding combination of like jazz and electronic music. And I mean, it took me a long time to really unpack this record and sink my teeth into it to kind of understand it, which maybe I still don't really, I don't know. At number 20, I have Aphex Twin, Syro. The return of Aphex Twin was certainly not a disappointment in my book. He is easily my favorite electronic producer, and Syro over here actually heard him making some newer sounds and staying cutting edge and refreshing as usual from Aphex Twin. At number 19, I have Tyler the Creator's Goblin. Now, you might be wondering, why do I have Goblin on this list from Tyler the Creator's discography? This actually isn't even my favorite Tyler the Creator record, but if you can recall back to when this was released in 2011, this is the album that made Tyler a household name. And that was actually probably for the wrong reasons with how polarizing this album was. Yonkers to this day is still one of the most aggressive hip-hop tracks ever, I think, and it certainly doesn't really forecast where Tyler's sound has gone nowadays, but without this record, he wouldn't be making albums like Flower Boy and Igor and all that. At number 18, I have Mac DeMarco's 2. The Prince of Indie Rock exploded into the scene with this record right here too, and it still is my favorite album from Mac. It has some of his best tracks on here, like Ode to Viceroy, how could you forget that song? And I mean, countless numbers of artists which just try to replicate what Mac was doing on here. At number 17, I have Shoo Shoo's Girl with Basket of Fruit. Yeah, my album of the year from 2019, and still one of the most, if not the most polarizing listening experiences I've ever had. I think this is Shoo Shoo's best record. It is so off the deep end and just wildly zany art rock coming on together on here. At number 16, I have Kanye West with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Now for this spot from Kanye here, obviously I had to mention him in this decade, and there's a few records I probably could have chosen, but I chose this one as being his most notorious one. I actually really enjoy it and think it is one of his better releases. I mean, it is just Kanye West at his most braggadocious and over the top. At number 15, I have Charli XCX with Pop 2. Now, most of you guys are probably gonna be like, whoa, why isn't Charli the one on this list? Yes, that may be a little bit more of a well-rounded record from Charli XCX, but this Pop 2 record over here, in my opinion, is a little bit more experimental and was way ahead of the curve when it came out in 2017. It does also showcase a pretty long feature list of all of the most relevant up-and-coming pop artists that have exploded in 2019, and I just think this kind of a pop record is like a once-in-a-decade type thing. At number 14, I have Danny Brown's Atrocity Exhibition. By far, I think the best Danny Brown record and one of the more experimental and polarizing hip-hop releases of the decade. This thing was like mind-melding upon impact and still is nowadays for me. Love Danny's zany and colorful personality on here, mixed with some of his more subdued moments, but easily some of the most wildly experimental hip-hop tracks to come out of this decade. At number 13, I have Deerhunter's Halcyon Digest. Deerhunter is one of those bands that I fear goes very severely underappreciated amongst most music crowds. But to me, Bradford Cox is one of the best songwriters of our generation, and Halcyon Digest, I think, is their most varied, experimental, and gratifying release. At number 12, I have Oneohtrix Point Never's Replica, one of the most influential and odd experimental electronic producers to come out of the 2010s. He accidentally invented Vaporwave under an alias Chuck Person with his Echo Jams Volume 1, but his work under the Oneohtrix Point Never tag has what has really stuck out the most. And Replica over here is just one of the most mind-bending odysseys going through electronic music that I think you could ever hear. If you've ever heard somebody throw around the term plunderphonics, I think this is the record to check out. It is the best one. At number 11, I have David Bowie's final release, Blackstar. This was kind of like a cultural event when it came out. Tragically, David Bowie passed away right after the release of this album, and over time, its themes of death and his own grieving kind of just have become even more haunting. But this is actually one of David Bowie's best albums. Whew! All right, we are in the top 10 here. Kicking off with number 10, I have My Bloody Valentine's MBV. Now, this was the return of the shoegaze legends My Bloody Valentine after a 22-year absence, and I think these guys absolutely delivered with a follow-up to Loveless, one of the best records of all time. And you know, after this came out, it was just a ridiculous ripple effect that showed everybody that like shoegaze was amazing, and you saw every indie rock band in the scene kind of trying to incorporate elements of shoegaze after this. But for me, Kevin Shields is an absolute all-time master of the guitar. At number 9, I have Bjork's Vulnicura. What an absolutely devastating breakup record, if not the breakup record of all breakup records from Bjork over here. Futuristic production, and how can you deny Bjork's presence on this release? At number 8, I have a singer-songwriter release from Alex G, DSU. This was Alex's breakout record from 2014, and it really showcased him as one of the best songwriters of the decade, in my opinion. A lot of people don't always resonate with his tracks, but there's something about the feeling that you get from an Alex G song that you can't get from anywhere else. And he has a really tasteful array of influences, almost like Modest Mouse meets Guided by Voices, meets the Pixies, meets Elliott Smith. And DSU here is solid front to back, a 10 in my book. At number 7, I have Swans, To Be Kind. Easily the most epic and grandiose and mind-bending rock record of the decade. Swans is just stretching every influence here to their extremities. And for a band this late in their career to be putting out their best material is pretty awe-inspiring. And I will never forget the first time I heard this record, there's no way. And every time I revisit it and listen to it, it is like that first time. At number 6, I have SZA's Control. Now, here's a record that actually surprised me with how much I enjoyed it, but I am just completely enamored with SZA as a singer. This record here features some of the best production, in my opinion, to come out of the decade for a hip-hop, pop, kind of R&B record. Hugely influential lyrics and concepts that came out of this thing that would influence more records to come out after it. At number 5, I have Death Grips, The Money Store. Hands down, in my opinion, the breakout artist of the decade was Death Grips, and arguably, The Money Store is their best record with their most refreshing sound when this exploded onto the scene in 2012. And even going back nowadays, it is still uncompromisingly refreshing and sounds like nothing else that's out there. But I mean, this has tracks on here like Get Got, The Fever, I've Seen Footage, Hacker. I mean, I could go on for hours about Death Grips, but I think we're really going to be appreciating these guys into the future. At number 4, I have LCD Soundsystem's This Is Happening. This, in my opinion, is the crowning jewel of the LCD Soundsystem discography. James Murphy and company here put together a record that is extremely danceable, extremely enjoyable, and just extremely refreshing every time I put it on. And over the past 10 years, it has still stuck with me as one of my favorite albums, but I just don't think you can deny the fantastic songwriting on this record. And at number 3, I have Frank Ocean's Blonde. Whew, boy, where do I start and begin with Frank Ocean and with this Blonde record? Well, I actually didn't really enjoy it that much the first time it came out. A lot of the subtleties in this record didn't really stick out to me at first, but over time, I just kept revisiting it, and over time, it has revealed itself to me to be the best R&B record of the decade. I think Frank Ocean's kind of like a one-of-a-kind lyricist and songwriter, and Blonde here, in my opinion, is just such an expertly crafted album that I can't pick out anything on it that I don't enjoy. And at number 2, I have Death Grips with No Love Deep Web. Now, there's a couple reasons why I have this at number 2 on my list. First off, it actually is my favorite Death Grips record. I think this is the best one. But second, more of what this record actually represents for the grander scheme of the music industry and what happened when it was released. If you're unaware, Death Grips was signed on to Epic Records to promise to release 2 albums in 2012. The first one they delivered on their promise with The Money Store in April, but then after that they became quiet after saying No Love Deep Web would come out, and they leaked the album, and it became the most pirated album of all time at the time. The cover, obviously extremely controversial. The music on it, obviously still extremely controversial and polarizing. But what this album did is cause some kind of a shift in the music industry that I saw, where people started dropping records without giving any notice. And nowadays, it's like everybody has this kind of shadowy operating style in the industry. And I think it's all thanks to Death Grips. And at number 1, my album of the decade for the 2010s has got to be Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. Now, this record has been talked about over and over and over again. I don't really have anything new and profound to say about it, other than I think it's the best record to come out this decade. I think it resonated with the most people across the world. And I mean, there's just no denying the experimentation and enjoyability factor that this record has. The narrative is there, and the production just becomes more rewarding and enjoyable over time. It hasn't gotten stale for me, honestly. So yeah, that actually concludes my top 100 albums of the decade list. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I actually really had a lot of fun going back, looking over the decade and finding which records I enjoyed. Some records grew on me some more, other ones cooled off, but you know, that always happens. So yeah, I mean, let me know in the comments below what your favorite records of this decade were, or what you thought about any of the albums on my list. And here's to a new decade starting off in 2020. Stay tuned, I'm gonna have some reviews coming up soon and some new content coming down the line. And as always, thank you for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button. Peace.